Hello everyone and welcome back to Destiny. Just a couple days ago, Bungie gave us our first look at the fall expansion titled Forsaken, and gave us a preview of what we can expect in year 2 with a snazzy new ViDoc. If you haven't watched it yet, definitely check it out. I'll try to link it down below. But for this video, we have a little tradition around here where we like to pick apart trailers like this and see if Bungie has snuck in any interesting details. Well, it turns out there's quite a bit. There's actually 23 of these details that I want to point out in this video, so without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so jumping right in, I want to start right at the beginning of the video, and that shows us a screenshot of what I believe to be the different barons that are going to be available to hunt down in the Tangled Shore area of the reef. It looks like we might have some sort of bounty system to hunt these guys down, and each of them are going to present a very unique challenge. One of them is a sniper, one of them is more melee oriented, and as we'll see in a little bit, one of them might be infused with the Hive, which is definitely something very interesting. Here, we have a very interesting figure that seems to be speaking in English, interestingly enough, kind of like Varix. So this character might be a Baron of some kind that might be allying himself with us and speaks our native tongue, just like Varix did in Destiny 1. You can see him hanging out here in his sort of throne room. And of course, one of the outstanding details for Forsaken is the fact that we have no idea what this story is really going to be about. We don't really have even hints at any big bads. We assume the hunt is a different aspect of the game reserved for endgame, but it could be part of the story to hunt down these 8 barons. Anyways, moving on, here we have a lineup of some of the general Scorn enemy types. We have some typical sort of dreg level enemies, and then we have a couple captains, and then we have some brute type enemies, which is the first time for the Fallen. But interestingly enough, I actually wanted to have this because we have what looks like an exotic engram on the ground. Up until this point, as far as I know, the only way to get an exotic engram to drop on the ground is when it comes out of a chest. So it's possible that killing certain enemies, perhaps in a very specific way, might net you a chance of them dropping an exotic engram right on the ground. Next up, we have a very clear indication of us getting our 3rd exotic trace rifle, of course filling the void slot, and interestingly enough, it's a very wavy type of beam, not as laser focused as something like the Prometheus lens, but rather it seems a lot more loose, but of course that could just be the graphical effects. I think this might be able to track enemies as they move with, of course, limited range, but what I hope it does is sort of like a gravity effect that pulls enemies into the beam. That would be pretty cool. Of course, we'll have to wait and see what exotic trait this has, but it's definitely cool to see that we're getting that 3rd trace rifle. Now, this next shot is definitely very interesting, and I hinted at this a little bit earlier, and that is the fact that this is one of the sort of fallen barons that we've seen in the screenshot, but this one has some very interesting Hive characteristics. For one, he's coming out of a Hive portal. Interestingly enough, he's also surrounded by some Hive architecture. This doesn't look like the Tangled Shore or even the Dreaming City, so this might be something like, I don't know, maybe even the Dreadnought, who knows, we could be going back there. But anyways, I did want to point this out because it's something we haven't really seen before. He's definitely infused with a lot of Hive energy, so this is the first time we're seeing a hybrid of Fallen and Hive, which is definitely very scary. Next up, I wanted to pause at the multiple shotgun loadout that they demonstrated during the video. Of course, the weapon slots are different. You can put any weapon into any slot, but interestingly enough, looking at this, we have 2 energy shotguns. Looking at the screenshots, it looked like we were still restricted to kinetic energy and power, although you could put whatever weapon into those slots, meaning that you would have to always have some kind of kinetic weapon, but looking at this screenshot, you definitely don't. Looks like you can run 2 energy and 1 power, and this definitely opens up some more possibilities, like in this one where he's running 2 kinetic and 1 power. So we'll have to wait and see whether or not there are restrictions to this. I mean, could you carry 3 power weapons? Also, it's important to note that spending the kinetic ammo or the energy ammo from one weapon does not deplete the reserves from the other. So it looks like the bricks that you pick up might replenish both, but they kind of have their own ammo capacities. It's also possible that the ammo that you do pick up, if you happen to have 2 slots with that weapon type, that it might split the brick into the 2 weapons. Of course, we'll have to wait and see. There will probably be an entire reveal stream, although the game will be playable at E3, which I will be attending, so there's a good chance we'll have our answers sooner than later. Now, this screenshot is also kind of like a dual purpose one, and that is to show off some new abilities for the Stormcaller Warlock. If you're looking carefully at this screen, he is definitely consuming one of his own grenades. So this kind of confirms that the new supers are in fact going to be following a distinct third subclass path with different passive abilities. Here, we can definitely see that you can consume one of your grenades to gain your own Arc Soul without having to put down a Rift. And of course, you might be wondering whether or not it's worth it for just a lowly Arc Soul, but in this case, it looks like it's about 20 seconds long. Now, we'll have to wait and see whether there's a way to replenish the timer, like when you're in the Rift, you can replenish it just by simply going back into your Rift. We'll have to wait and see whether or not you can replenish Arc Soul. It would make sense for it to replenish after every kill, but of course, we'll have to wait and see how this works exactly. Moving on, we have some really nice looking weapons. When I first saw this in the video, I thought this might be a new exotic pulse rifle, but looking at some other screenshots of different weapons that seem to be in the same set, I think this is just a legendary set of armor that maybe belongs to the Dreaming City, perhaps even the Raid. But of course, they don't typically show off things like raid weapons in these ViDocs, so again, we'll have to wait and see. Next up, we see a shot of one of the bows. I believe that we're getting maybe only one of each bow archetype, a long range, a medium range, and a short range. I think this is going to be the long range bow. This one looks to be the close range one because it seems to dish out a little bit more impact, and as we'll see, it looks like it shoots 3 arrows at once, which is definitely pretty cool. And then this one is most likely the medium range bow. From a sort of technical design standpoint, it seems to be somewhere in the middle. Then again, here are 3 arrows that have been fired all at once, and then it caused some kind of shock to the enemy next to it. Of course, this could be just an exotic trait for an exotic bow and arrow, which would definitely be pretty cool. Moving on, we have some interesting details about the new Gambit mode. Here we can see the HUD, we see the score at the top. What I think we're seeing here at the top is the white bar indicating how many motes we've collected but haven't deposited. And then the actual colored section of the bar is how many have been successfully deposited into your bank. I think this is going to be valuable information to know. That way you can strategize and make your way over there or send a blocker or something to stop them from depositing those motes, and then you can go and claim them maybe for yourself. A couple other details include your own personal mote counter on the left side, followed by an invasion timer. I think this is a timer that you get once you invade the other side, meaning that it seems you have about 30 seconds to do as much damage as possible, and you even have a counter of how many enemies you're killing right next to it. We can also see that this is a multi-round mode, meaning that you get the best of 3, as indicated by the circles at the top. Here we get another look at an invader. It looks like they're going to appear red, or you will appear red when you're invading the other side, so that the enemy team can very clearly see that you're not where you're supposed to be. Here we can also see that the new super for the Void Hunter is called Shadow Mark, and that is a roaming super that gets you 2 Void Blades to go deal some damage, very similar to Arc Blade. Here we have another shot of the raid entrance, and this kind of builds a little bit more onto our theories for what the story might be. Here we see this doorway that looks very kind of Taken-like with the signature black and white. It's not quite as Taken-y as the other elements in the trailer, but either way, I'm starting to get a very large notion that we might be dealing with the Taken in a lot more serious manner than you might expect, and the raid might actually be a Taken raid. Here are a few other examples of environments that are within the Dreaming City that are very much sort of corrupted by the Taken. And I think this is what the developers are talking about when they're referencing that the Dreaming City environment will be changing week to week as raiders clear the raid. So I think as we continue to clear the raid more and more, we might be clearing the corruption from the rest of the city. It's definitely a very interesting idea, and I'm very interested to see what this means for different puzzles. Like for instance, this shot that we're looking at here, is this something that we can't interact with until the community clears it of the Taken corruption? And even in this shot of the Dreaming City, it looks like the Taken have even taken over the spire, as you can see sort of black sections on it that typically wouldn't be there. So this might serve as an indication week to week in how corrupted the area is. My theory is that this is going to cycle every few weeks because you don't want new players to miss out on this kind of weekly event. My guess is that we'll clear the corruption over the course of a few weeks, and then maybe week 5 it'll reset back to the way it was so that other new players can experience the world-changing event. Here again we can see a couple Taken Blights. This could be part of a new public event, or it could be another indication that the Taken have taken over the Dreaming City. But moving on from the Dreaming City, we have a very interesting weapon that we can see here in the trailer, and that is what people believe to be the Thorn, or at least some incarnation of it. From the lore, we know that there is a version of the Thorn called the Rose, that is sort of the gun before it got corrupted, so this could be a version of that, although this weapon does seem to be infused again with Taken energy, so it's hard to say what exactly is going on here. Either way, the gun looks pretty cool. I would think that there might be some sort of damage over time effect. You can see as you fire the gun, you get a lot more of that Taken energy bursting from inside. So I'm very curious to see exactly what this weapon is all about. It might even be something like the Raid exotic. It wouldn't be too far of a stretch if the Raid is in fact a Taken Raid. Either way, I'm always going to be excited about a new exotic hand cannon. Next up, we have a couple things I wanted to point out in collections, namely is going to be the item sets. You can see that each of the sort of different activities or different factions have their own item sets. This way you can dive into it and see exactly what you're missing from that set. We see 2 Trials of the 9 sets, which indicates that one of them might be perhaps a flawless set, or maybe a set from a different season. My money is the different season because that is when the gear actually changes. But aside from that, we see item sets from the Crucible, Dead Orbit, and New Monarchy as well. Here is a shot at some of the new legendary sets of armor. One thing I wanted to point out is a pretty cool Warlock Bond in the center there. Interestingly enough, it looks like a projected version of Hawthorne's Falcon named Lewis, so it could be something related to clans. Moving on, we have some details in the Triumphs tab. Namely, we have some of these medals that you can earn at the bottom. Interestingly, one of them is grayed out while 2 of them are missing. My guess is that these medals tie into your ability to have your own title, which is something that has been confirmed. On the right side, we see your progress towards what I assume is the Triumphs. So these aren't what I would say to be bounties. I think these are just progress to completing your Triumphs tab, but it does look like you can at least track one thing. My hope is that this is part of a sort of system-wide tracking system. Hopefully we'll be able to also track our pursuits. Next up, we have that exotic Void Sword that we saw. You've probably already seen shots of this on the internet, but I did want to point out some of the exotic traits that it has. As you can see in this series of screenshots, it looks like this weapon has the ability to toss out void projectiles, which seem to do a lot of damage. Now, this next series of screenshots is also a very hot topic of discussion, mainly about what the hell is going on here. So first up, you see a Titan casting a Ward of Dawn bubble, and then we see what I assume to be part of the new Dawnblade subclass, and that is the ability to sort of stab the ground with your sword to cause some kind of solar explosion at the very least. Some people are theorizing that this might be a way of combining supers. I don't think that's the case. I think this just makes for a pretty shot. I think they happen to be using their supers at the same time, most likely in some kind of strategic way to protect themselves against this invader. They're clearly playing Gambit because it shows the portal, it shows the invader coming in, so I suppose if you're saving your super for something, it's probably going to be for the invader. Next up, we see an over-the-shoulder shot at what appears to be new exotic boots for the Warlock. Sadly, I'm not able to get a screenshot of the text with more visibility, but if anyone can, it would be interesting if there is the ability to discern what exactly these boots do based on the information on the screen. Next up, we have an in-game shot of the new rocket launcher, Jade Rabbit. This weapon is of course getting a lot of attention because of its incredible exotic perk, which has it shoot 2 different rockets at once, one of them void, one of them solar. The void one suppresses, and the solar one does damage over time. So again, a very interesting exotic, shoots 2 rockets at once, which seems very overpowered, but of course that's in the spirit of the new exotics, which are supposed to be a lot more overpowered feeling. Here it is from the front, and you can see that the weapon actually has 2 different rocket barrels. And here you can see that the void rocket seems to land before the solar, which makes sense. You want to disable everyone before you burn them to death. Now, finally in this shot, we have some very interesting items. First up, we have what I believe to be the exotic bow. It's not a very clear picture, but we've seen it in other parts of the trailer. It has a lot more sort of paneling on it than the other bows, so this could be what's going on. Either way, the Titan in the center is definitely wielding some kind of exotic bear arms, which is very epic. It will most likely have some kind of melee-related exotic trait. Hopefully they're just called like the bear hugs or something like that. That would be pretty funny. Here it is in a different shot with some better light. And then, of course, the Titan is flanked with a couple warlocks. One of them is wielding what I believe is the new Void Trace Rifle. And then we see the Taken Rose hand cannon again to the left. But anyways, that brings us to the end of the details that I wanted to point out from the ViDoc. Of course, I'm sure there's a lot more in here that you'll tell me about in the comments below, and I wouldn't expect anything less. Again, as I mentioned at the top of the video, I am making my way out to E3, so I'm going to get my hands on Gambit. I'm going to get my hands on the new weapon system. We're also going to have a lot more coverage of other games, and I'm going to be posting a lot of that stuff over on my second channel, Nerd On, so definitely check that out. I'll leave a link down below. Anyways, let me know what your favorite detail was from the ViDoc. Did you find anything more interesting? Let's discuss. Drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe for more Destiny content. And I will see you all next time.